Well, welcome to the show, everyone. Unfortunately, we're starting the show with some more bad news out of, unfortunately, once again, our state, my home state here, the state of Florida. Another tragedy happening in Florida. Several fatalities were reported after a newly installed pedestrian bridge at Florida International University collapsed earlier today, leaving 8 vehicles trapped under the sprawling wreckage. Senator Bill Nelson is saying now that 6 to 10 deaths are a result from the bridge collapse. They're not exactly sure the number because they still have to move the bridge and get under there and see what's under there. It's a horrific situation. Dr. Mark McKinney of Kendall Regional Medical Center there said during a news conference that the hospital has taken in 10 patients, 2 of them in extremely critical condition. One person arrived at the hospital in cardiac arrest but survived, and a second has serious brain injury. I'm getting this from Fox News. By the way, President Trump has tweeted saying continuing to monitor the heartbreaking bridge collapse at FIU. So tragic. Many brave first responders rushed in to save lives. Thank you for your courage. Praying this evening for all who are affected. We're finding out a lot about this bridge. The bridge was not even finished. It was still under construction. It was called one of its kind pedestrian bridge, first one of its kind, that swings into place. Some were calling it the Insta Bridge, which kind of it's supposed to be safer. It's supposed to be put up very quickly. And it was still under construction, and it collapsed earlier today. The construction company tweeted out this, says, "Our family's thoughts and prayers go out to everyone affected by the terrible tragedy. The new University City Bridge, which was under construction, experienced a catastrophic collapse, causing injuries and loss of life." It's a Manila Construction. It says, "Manila Construction is a family business, and we are all devastated and doing everything we can to assist. We will conduct a full investigation to determine exactly what went wrong and will cooperate with investigators on scene in every way." So there is the latest we have on the bridge collapse. If there's a press conference coming out from there, we will cover that live as well. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee, the voice of reason in a world that is beyond reason. We are on till 9:20 tonight.
What?
Yeah, a little bit different tonight. We're on till 9:20 p.m. because Gators basketball comes on right after us. And it's start of March Madness for them. So it should be pretty interesting there. So we'll see if go Gators. We'll see if they have a good chance. I'm pretty sure they'll do well.
Who do they play? Do you know?
I had it in front of me, but no, I don't.
I'm sorry to ask that question because I don't follow basketball, but I saw a great finish to a game earlier this afternoon over in the station kitchen between Loyola of Chicago and Miami. What a game that was! One in the last second with a shot.
That's March Madness for you. There you go. So, yeah, Gators basketball is coming on right after. But we still have a lot of stuff to get to on the show. Trump has made some moves in the past week, and we're going to talk about that. Very interesting. Not sure what his thinking is on some of this stuff. So
you're not the only one.
So we're gonna try to figure that out together. And there's a report that came out of Pittsburgh, Beaver County up there, that shows that STDs among young people, adolescents 15 to 24, are on the rise, are increasing quite a bit. Mm-hmm. And that was just out of that one county, but I did a little more research, and it's pretty much on the rise across the country. So we're gonna play some of that report. We're going to talk about that as well. So I was thinking about the bridge collapse today, another unfortunate tragedy out of Florida. And unfortunately, this thing, it's going to be forgotten about in a couple of days, probably.
You think?
In a few days, we will have moved on, unfortunately, and we'll have news updates, but most people will have forgotten about it.
Mm-hmm. In other words, it will eventually get forced off the front page.
Yeah. Now, why is that? because there's no angle to it. There's no political angle that people can try to add to this tragedy.
Mm-hmm.
I was talking to a friend earlier, and she says, "Did you hear about the bridge collapse?" And she goes, "Will this be used by Trump to push for infrastructure spending? Will this be another thing that will be used by Trump to push for infrastructure spending?" And I told her, no, there's no way it could be because the bridge is brand new. So that you can't say our infrastructure is crumbling, we need to spend more with this instance because the bridge is brand new. It's a new bridge. But the fact is, and it got me thinking, it's interesting that was the first thing she thought of.
Mm-hmm.
That as soon as this happens, and I know she's not the only one, people in newsrooms, in newspaper offices, on TV, on Twitter, all over this country, they hear a tragedy like that, and unfortunately the first thing we think of is, how can I spin this?
Or is it politically motivated?
Yeah. Is this politically motivated? But how can I spin this for a political agenda?
Mm-hmm.
Can't let a good crisis go to waste.
I've heard that before.
Exactly. And it was funny that was the first. I know that people out there, that's what they were doing. We have become so obsessed with spinning events to forward a political agenda that we don't even recognize the tragedy anymore. We don't even have time to address the initial tragedy. We immediately go into spin mode. I don't really think this is a good thing for the country. And both sides do this, by the way, because we had a train collision not too long ago, the Amtrak train, and immediately Trump tweets in response and calls for more infrastructure spending. That came out anytime, and of course we have the shooting in Parkland, another tragedy down there, and immediately people are saying, "I don't care about your thoughts and prayers. We need gun control.
Do something now.
Do something." Every time a tragedy happens, we immediately run course to the government. That's always what we do. We run to the government and we say, "Do something," before we even can address the actual tragedy that's happening. I guarantee you that we had the F-18 crash that happened last night.
Mm-hmm.
2 Navy pilots were killed.
Correct.
I guarantee you there was people out there saying, "This is why we need to rebuild the military. Our military is crumbling. We need more military spending." In fact, Fox News this morning was basically saying that. That was their first thought. That we have a crisis like this, and we immediately think, how can I spin this for my political agenda? I don't necessarily think this is a good thing for the future. And you know what? I'm probably guilty of this sometimes as well. When you have a 24-hour news cycle, or you have to fill a 3-hour radio show or whatever it is, you want to fill it with this kind of stuff because controversy sells, and people immediately start listening to you.
And the news cycle changes every 24 to 36 hours, and new stuff comes along and old stuff gets pushed away.
Yeah, and exactly right. And we have to run to it. So, I criticized Dana Lash, when the NRA spokesman, when she came out and she said, many in legacy media love mass shootings.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And I criticized her because I don't think they love mass shootings. But I think she might have been onto something with the idea that anytime something like that happens, whether it's a mass shooting, a train crash, a plane crash, a terrorist, whatever it is, that our first thought isn't the victims or anything like that. It's, how do I spin this to a political agenda? And maybe that's what Dana was referring to, and maybe she was onto something with that. So I want to move on as well to the walkouts yesterday. The student walkouts. We had the walkouts out of schools all over the country.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? I don't really know. What were the walkouts all about? What were they all? I've heard 5 different explanations.
Is that right?
On what they were about. And really, it depends, once again, on who you ask. So yesterday, a bunch of schools, a bunch of students walked out for 17 minutes. It was supposed to represent the 17 victims of the Parkland shooting.
Mm-hmm.
If you watched CNN, or if you went to USA Today, or if you went to MSNBC, or if you talk to any Democrat senator, they'll tell you the walkout was about
gun control.
Gun control. But if you go to some other places, they'll tell you that the walkout was about honoring the victims.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing, once again, how that is spun. How it depends on who you ask, but you have a walkout all over the country that was really organized. Apparently, it started with the organizers of the Women's March also did this as well. And their agenda is obviously gun control. And they know if they get enough kids out there to hold up signs for gun control and all this stuff, that they can put it on all the TV networks, and you have created a narrative now. That's all we do is create narratives. We don't look at facts. We create narratives. So you created an emotional narrative now. Look at the kids. They're devastated. They're rising up because they have no choice. This must stop. And nobody likes mass shootings. But the fact is, shootings are actually down across the country. Schools are still actually some of the safest places you can be. But that's just another example of, I was watching this and I'm like, what is this really all about? Other than we're just following the crowd. It just seemed like one of those other instances where we're just following the crowd. The crowd is going out. And we're like, well, everyone else is doing this, so we have to do this as well.
Well, there's so many different issues, like you say. Everybody tries to spin it to their advantage, but the thing they should be talking about, and I don't hear that much talk about it, is how do you make the schools safer?
Yeah.
And signs saying gun-free zone is not going to accomplish that at all.
Well, and not only that, but there's reports out there that some kids were putting, they want teachers on, that not all these kids agree that guns should be taken away from everyone, that guns should be banned. Oh, there's a lot of kids that don't agree. They're not getting the attention, of course, because it's about the narrative, and that goes against the narrative. But apparently there were some kids out that were saying they want teachers armed, and they were told by the principal and the teachers, you can't have that sign. No, you can't have that. Oh, NRA kills people. Yes, you can have that one. That's great. This other one, no. So the walkout yesterday was really more divisive than uniting. Some are saying this was a uniting moment for American kids. No, it really was more divisive because it was an attempt to spin gun control, a gun control agenda. 407-916-5400. Text to 23680. We'll talk a little bit. We'll update a little bit more on the bridge collapse. More news we get in on that and much more. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We'll be right back.
If you miss any of the show, you can download the Beyond Reason podcast on iTunes. The voice of reason in a world that is beyond reason is back now.
So if you're just joining us, we were updating the latest news. There was a bridge collapse that happened at Florida International University earlier today, leaving 8 vehicles trapped under the wreckage. Senator Bill Nelson is reporting that there are 6 to 10 deaths from the bridge collapse. Rick Scott has tweeted out, says, I'm on my way to Florida International University to be briefed by local law enforcement and university officials. Says, I have spoken with Miami-Dade County Police Chief Juan Perez about the pedestrian bridge collapse at FIU. I will be in constant communication with law enforcement throughout the day. Bill Nelson tweeted out, my heart goes out to the victims and the families affected by the tragic bridge collapse at FIU. The bridge was hailed as a new type Insta bridge that was supposed to swing into place and be put in place very quickly. I saw other reports that said it was actually going through a type of stress test when this happened. I'm not a construction expert, but I'm not sure why they would do that while people were going under it.
Exactly.
But I mean, maybe that's common. I have no idea on that. But I always get a little nervous when we start hailing things as Insta Bridge, the safest. This is supposed to be a really safe thing. Swings into place, really great. I always get worried about stuff like that because it just reminds me of the Titanic, when they said the Titanic was unsinkable, and yeah, look what happened there. So, but here we actually have some audio. There was a witness out right after it happened, and got his phone out and got some video and audio of the immediate aftermath, and you can hear some of the sounds. Here it is.
Menor, mira lo que nos pasó. Brother, nos salvamos de broma. Mira lo que le pasó al carro. Mira lo que nos cayó encima. Marico, gracias a Dios no nos pasó nada, pero bueno, los carros adelante sí, la gente se murieron. Cayó la baranda ahí. Dios, nos salvamos de suerte, loco.
So there you go. That was from the immediate aftermath of that. Apparently there were many nurses that were close by, nurses and medical professionals that immediately rushed in to try to help people. Like I said, 6 to 10 deaths. There were 10 patients taken to the hospital. 2 of them are in extremely critical condition. So if there's any more on that, any breaking news on that, we will update you on the latest on that. So another piece of breaking news that happened this week, kind of surprising to a lot of people. Not so surprising that President Trump fired somebody or somebody resigned in the Trump administration. That seems to be pretty common nowadays, and I'm actually going to talk a little bit more about that later in the show. But Larry Kudlow from CNBC was hired by Trump to be the chief economic advisor and director of the National Economic Council. A lot of people were kind of surprised by this because Larry Kudlow is well known to be very big on free trade and against tariffs, and in fact was against Trump's tariffs. And actually the audio of that from last week when Trump started implementing these tariffs on steel and aluminum, which we've talked about a lot on this show, and I have more on that. This is what he said on CNBC.
No, it won't unwind it, but it's a bad omen. He's so good on taxes. He's so good on tax cuts. He's so good on deregulation, infrastructure. I even like him on immigration. He's never been good on trade. There's a long, ongoing conversation he and I have had, Steve Moore,
Did you
Art
know
Laffer.
these tariffs were coming?
Well, I heard from somebody close to it that they were coming, and once he called the meeting of steelmakers, you could see it, handwritings on the wall. He took a harsh side of it, 25%, right, and 25 and 10 on aluminum. You know, it's such a killer here. Let's try to look at this. There's 200,000, so more or less, 200,000 steel and iron workers in America, and aluminum. There's 5.5 million employed by businesses that use steel.
Like the automakers and others.
Auto, energy, infrastructure,
from the beer,
cars, planes,
yeah.
Diet Pepsi and Diet Coke. I don't want to give everyone free time, but that's what you're getting.
So that really should be my voice of reason of the day, actually, because he's exactly right on everything he said in his criticism about the tariffs, that you're really hurting more people than you're helping. And it's really just the government manipulating the market and helping a specific industry because it thinks it's best. Now, despite that was last week that Larry Kudlow said that. Here is audio of Larry Kudlow talking about why he accepted the position in the Trump administration. Here's what he said.
I've been around a while. My head is not turned easily. I've served in the White House, et cetera, but just to talk to him for 30, 40 minutes at a clip, 3-4 days in a row is a wonderful thing. I just want to say that. It's a wonderful thing. And he and I have known each other many years. I've interviewed him on radio and TV. I was in the campaign helping out. I know him, reasonably well. And, it was just a terrific experience. I don't want to sound sophomoric, but it was just a really good thing.
So he talked about how he picked up the phone, had a conversation with Trump, a few conversations with Trump, and he liked it so much he accepted.
Well, you know, we've heard that before, though, about Trump, that he's very good one-on-one.
Yeah, we heard that from a bunch of people, even people who really didn't like Trump when they met with him when he was just president-elect. That's what they were saying. They had a really good conversation and stuff like that. But I really do want to know what was talked about, because Larry Kudlow is against the tariff policy. And the last guy in the position left, reportedly, because he was against the tariff policy. So what was talked about that all of a sudden convinced Larry Kudlow to come on board, other than that that's the president of the United States and you want to come on board? I honestly think it's this. There's two theories about tariffs. One is that, generally speaking, tariffs are just good because it protects certain industries, and you have to protect certain industries to help the economy. There's another theory out there that this is just a negotiating tactic, that Trump really doesn't want tariffs. And he's kind of revealed that because he had exceptions for Mexico and Canada with the steel tariffs already, and he talked about exceptions with the EU. So this seems to be focused more at China, which Trump always talks about China. And he's saying this is a negotiating tactic. He's trying to get China and some of these other countries to open up their free trade, to get rid of the tariffs on our imports into their country, so our exports into their country. And this is just all tough talk. That might have been what Trump told Larry Kudlow. The problem is, will that work? Or will it just start a trade war? Kudlow in the past has believed it will just start a trade war. That's why you don't do that. Just because another country puts tariffs doesn't mean we should put tariffs, because all that does is hurt our country and our consumers and doesn't help anything. So I don't know. Maybe Trump is just very persuasive one-on-one in a conversation like that. Or maybe he just said, look, I know we disagree, but I want people who disagree with me in my administration, even though he has said that in the past, and then they got fired, like Rex Tillerson, who was fired because he disagreed with Trump.
Yeah, I've always said that he's a poker player, and he's bluffing, which kind of fits in with he's using this as a negotiation ploy.
Yeah, the wonder, it's just wonder if it will actually work or not. And the problem with it is he might have just been saying that to Kudlow, but maybe he really believes in tariffs. In the past, he has. Trump has always been a big believer in tariffs. So it's kind of interesting where this is going to go. I don't know. There's a part of me, and I'm going to start the next hour talking about this, but I'm starting to think that Trump just likes the chaos. That he likes all the chaos coming out of his administration. That maybe even he is the one who's leaking all this stuff. There's a theory behind that, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later. We have a lot more to get to on the show. If we have time, I want to end this hour with things so beyond reason you just can't make them up. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We will be right back.
If you heart Beyond Reason Radio, listen to the Beyond Reason Radio podcast on iHeartRadio. Just download the iHeartRadio app and search Beyond Reason Radio. This is Orlando's Smart Talk Radio. Beyond Reason Radio continues now.
So according to Fox News, just the latest update on the FIU bridge collapse, officials there are saying that 4 have been confirmed killed. But Senator Bill Nelson came out and said there's 6 to 10 deaths from the bridge collapse. So we don't have a firm number yet on the number of deaths. Hopefully it is just 4 and not any more than that. Hopefully that's the end of it, but we will find out.
Nelson said that mid-afternoon, so that could have just been the initial number that he got, and it's been moved downward.
Well, that would be good. It just seems like numbers have never moved downward. So if it would, but prayers for the families of the victims of this tragedy. So I wanted to play some audio here from someone I usually really like. He's kind of new to Fox News. And he'll go on special report, and he has his own show called The Next Revolution. His name is Steve Hilton. He's actually from the UK. Usually when he comes on and does his show, I really like what he has to say. But he did this monologue on his show this past week on tariffs. And there's some things I really have a problem with where he's going with this. And I think a lot of this is just he's super supportive of Trump. So he had to go down this road. But I wanted to play it for you and give you an example of a narrative that I just don't think is accurate. Here it is.
Why is the establishment so up in arms about this? What did they think they were getting with Donald Trump? As I said before, he's a populist, not a Republican. He beat the establishment Republicans in 2016, every single one of them. And one of the main reasons he beat them was trade. He made clear he would get rid of the open borders trade agenda that helped the elite but hurt American workers for at least 4 decades. The ruling elite in Washington, the politicians, the deep state bureaucrats, and most importantly, the big donors and lobbyists that, as we show you all the time on Swamp Watch, really pull the strings. Well, they've been pushing an ideological trade agenda that says we'll open up to other countries and everyone will benefit. Well, some people benefited for sure. China, our biggest global enemy, we made them richer and put them on the path to the world domination they now think is within their reach. Great job, Presidents Clinton, Bush, and Obama, who helped make that happen. The CEOs and Wall Street wheeler dealers, they benefited too. They rose above the humdrum concerns of their own country and became citizens of the world. Who cares where you make money, as long as there's more of it for you? And oh boy, was there more of it for them. That's the story of the last 40 years. The rich got richer and half the country got poorer. Incomes went down and jobs went away, devastating families and communities in every part of America except the places where the smug elitists who pushed these policies actually live. Now, finally, there's change. The president, just as he promised and was elected to do, is pushing back on the open borders trade agenda. We're told by the elites these tariffs are stupid. They'll just lead to higher prices for American products made with imported steel and aluminum. In the end, more jobs will be lost in those industries than the jobs protected by the tariffs. But why should prices go up? There's no law of economics or the market that says that. If they wanted, the big corporations complaining about the tariffs could keep prices the same, keep their workforce the same, and cut their profits.
Okay,
but
stop.
Of course, they won't do that because cutting their profits affects them.
Okay, I just had to stop it there because there's some things I really have a problem with what he was saying there. One, I'll tell you what I agree with first. I do agree that we shouldn't be too surprised by Trump's tariff policy because he did campaign on it. It's something he has talked about for years. It was always a big concern of mine and a big concern of a lot of conservatives dealing with Trump. So he's right about that. Mm-hmm. Why are we so up in arms? We knew this was coming. The part that I really have a problem with is Steve Hilton is playing this game where if you disagree with Trump on this, you're an elitist. It's the elitists, the establishment, who are really against Trump on this. The rich Wall Street bankers are the ones who benefited from free trade, and all of the rest of America failed. You know, not failed, but were hurt by free trade. I just don't like this game. For one, to call, I'm not an elitist by any stretch of the imagination. Trust me, I'm not even close to that. But there are many economists out there who just disagree with the tariff policy because they don't think it's what's good for the whole country. Steve Hilton also talked about there that, incomes went down. He said, we've lost all these jobs. We didn't benefit. The only ones who benefited were the rich fat cats. But I've gone over the stats before on the show, and that's not true. There have been studies that show that incomes actually went up. Employment actually went up. GDP growth actually went up. And believe it or not, exports actually went up. Manufacturing output actually went up under NAFTA. So, but I just don't like the whole game of, well, if you disagree with Trump on this, you're just an elitist. No, there's a lot of people who disagree with that policy because it's just a bad policy. I don't like the straw man arguments there. That's something that Trump kind of does, and I know it's something that happens a lot in politics, but I think in this time it doesn't really work. Another thing he talked about there at the very end, he was saying, well, how come those corporations, why don't they just take a hit on their profits?
Right.
That's a Democrat line. That's something I hear Democrats say. Well, these evil corporations, they're just so greedy and they want their big profits. Why don't they just take less profits? That's something I hear from Democrats all the time.
You're in business to make a profit.
You're in business to make a profit, but this is just not how economics works. When you start telling businesses, you know what, you need to take less profits, that's just more government. That's just asking for more government intervention in the economy. There are no doubt that sometimes businesses can be a little greedy and business people can be a little greedy. But the best way to regulate that is not to get the greedy government involved and try to over-regulate the market. That makes things worse, even if it's based on good intentions. What works is free market capitalism.
And competition.
When you start going down the road, well, those corporations should just get less profit. Why don't they just take profit hits? They're just going to charge you more. That all it's feel good, sound good stuff. But what are you going to force them to do it? No. So what we have to talk about is not intentions, but real effects. When you raise taxes, because a tariff's a tax, that is passed on to the consumer. You might not like it when a corporation does that, but that is what happens. And when you protect a certain industry, it's bad for the market. It just is. Especially since someone else brought up a good point that I thought was really interesting. What happens a lot of times when you do protectionist tariffs like on steel, so you do a 25% tariff on steel, okay? And that's supposed to help American businesses, American steel industries. What the American businesses do is they raise their prices 23%. So they're under the 25% of the tariff, but they still raise their prices as well. Why not? They can get away with it now. They don't have the competition. And that hurts the economy. That's what happens when you decide, oh, well, I'm the government, and I'm going to decide that this business here should do better instead of facing competition, instead of looking at the overall economy. So I just didn't like where he was going with that. Someone I usually really like, but I thought he deserved a little criticism there. 407-916-5400. Text to 23680. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We'll be right back.
It would be beyond reason not to listen to Yaffee on your TuneIn Radio app. Download the app today and search Beyond Reason Radio. The conscience in your ear telling you the difference between right and wrong. Yaffee is back on the air.
Yes, welcome back. This is another edition of Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We are on till 9:20 p.m. tonight.
9:20?
I know, every time I say it, Tom Benson is like, what? You knew this. Well, we have Gators basketball coming right after this. It's the start of March Madness for Gators, so they have a basketball game tonight, and we will be airing it right here on News Radio 102.5 WFLA until the very end, but we're doing Beyond Reason Radio right up until the Gators pregame. So we have a lot more to get to on the show right before Gators basketball, and then afterwards, stay tuned and enjoy the game. So sounds good there. So there's a little story here that I found. Didn't get a whole lot of attention, but to me, it really caught my attention for a few reasons. So Beaver County, Pennsylvania. There's a story that came out of their local CBS affiliate there. The headline, Beaver County sees uptick in STD numbers, sexually transmitted diseases, among young people. and that means 15 to 24-year-olds. And here's the report from the local CBS affiliate on this, and I have a couple things to say about it, but here it is.
They are numbers that are hard to comprehend in a time of social media, health, and awareness.
The younger population is more promiscuous today than probably ever before.
When Dr. Frank DeCenzo saw the alert put out by the State Health Department of Beaver County, he found the numbers
quite concerning, and we in our practice have seen an uptick in the number of gonorrhea cases and chlamydia cases.
The alert says among 15 to 24-year-old men and women, gonorrhea in particular was up 34% last year compared to 2016, and HIV up nearly 3 times.
The HIV rate increasing 300% is very concerning.
There is equal concern in Allegheny County, where Dr. Karen Hacker at the health department says, quote, our incident rates for syphilis, chlamydia, gonorrhea, and HIV have and continue to exceed the state's incident rates, end quote.
I've seen high school students that tell me they've had, multiple sexual partners, and ladies as young as 14.
His OBGYN practice encourages his sexually active patients to be tested.
So a patient could have this ongoing for some time and be in the category of no symptoms.
And spreading it to others. I took the question of why this is happening to the CMU campus.
I guess people don't think it's that much of a big deal, especially with advancements in medical care.
Lack of responsibility, lack of proper sex ed teaching.
A lack of feeling comfortable talking to each other about something that you might have.
Dr. DeCenzo says in jeopardy, a woman's ability to ever have a child.
The good doctor points out the way to avoid these problems in the first place is to use a condom. But first, he says, young people need to recognize the risk and the need.
So what was not mentioned at all in that news report?
Well, we discussed this yesterday,
yes.
wasn't it? Yesterday or earlier today?
Yeah, a couple of days ago, I think.
It's called abstaining.
Exactly. Notice that? What's the 100% foolproof way to make sure you don't get an STD? Don't have sex.
Mm-hmm.
They were talking about 14-year-olds having multiple partners. And nobody thought the solution was maybe there's something wrong with the culture and we're not teaching our kids enough in this culture to wait. Even if you don't wait until you're married, at least wait until you're older than 14. But they should wait until they're married. And it was amazing. The first thing, we need more sex ed education. Sex ed in schools or something. And they need to use condoms more. How about they wait to have sex?
Hand out free condoms in school.
Don't they understand that stuff like that just encourages it more sometimes? All right. And by the way, although that report was talking about Beaver County, Pennsylvania, I did a little research, and apparently this is a problem nationwide. This was according to CNN last year. In 2016, Americans were infected with more than 2 million new cases of gonorrhea, syphilis, and chlamydia, the highest number of these sexually transmitted diseases ever reported. That came out of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. CDC, director of CDC's Division of STD Prevention, said, clearly we need to reverse this disturbing trend. The CDC cannot do this alone, and we need every community in America to be aware that this risk is out there and help educate their citizens on how to avoid it. So later in the article from CNN, they ask what happened. Why is this happening? Why are more kids getting these STDs? This was the first thing it says in the article. Several factors are fueling the STD epidemic. Funding cutbacks for prevention, education, and healthcare programs, an ongoing debate about sex education for young people with cutbacks in that arena, particularly from this administration. They blame Trump,
of course,
for more kids having sex. What? Really? And they say, it's the lack, we're cutting back on sex education, so the kids out there, they just don't know. They don't know that they get STDs, so they're just having sex all over the place. And we need to tell them about condoms, and that'll fix the problem.
The part of the problem is the kids at that age think they know everything that needs to be And they also think that it's not going to happen to me.
To act like this is another example, too, where instead of parents being the ones taking responsibility, it's the job of the parents to talk to their kids about sex. It's always been the job of the parents to talk to their kids about sex. We're now blaming the lack of funding in schools for kids having too much sex. This is where our culture is now. Kids are having too much sex, getting STDs, and we're saying, well, it's the school's fault. It's not the school's fault. It's the culture's fault. And then, of course, later on they say, and a rise in social media dating apps have all contributed to the rise. That one probably should be first. That's probably the biggest reason. Not lack of sex education teaching, for crying out loud. Oh, dear. And by the way, that was talking about STDs in general.
Mm-hmm.
But I did a little more research, and the CDC points out that incidence and prevalence, this is from CDC's website, prevalence estimates suggest that young people aged 15 to 24 acquire half of all new STDs, and that 1 in 4 sexually active adolescent females has an STD. So that tells you right there that most of these new STD cases are coming from young people.
Mm-hmm.
1 in 4 young girls. This is a cultural issue. And maybe it would be a good idea for parents in our culture, and, hey, teachers in schools, which actually Trump is doing, by the way. Trump is pushing that abstaining should be abstinence. That's the word I was looking for. Abstinence should be taught in schools along with this. Because it works, especially at 14, for crying out loud. Oh, man, I just couldn't believe that. So that was something that was grinding my gears a little bit. And another story that I found that's really interesting, too, is that Generation Z, this generation that's being talked about with all these STDs, they're also the less Christian than ever. It says, Generation Z is from Fox News. The generation following millennials is the least Christian generation to date. According to a new Barna study, 34% of Generation Z's religious affiliation is either atheist, agnostic, or none. Maybe there's a correlation there. I don't know. Just saying. I know some people are not going to like that I brought that up, but it's true. All right, we have one more segment to go, and then it's Gators basketball after that. I appreciate you joining me so far for Beyond Reason Radio, and we will be right back.
That nothing comes from indifference.
Yes, welcome back to the show, everyone. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I am your host, Michael Yaffee, the voice of reason, the voice of truth in a world that is beyond reason. We did 1 hour of the show so far right here on News Radio 102.5 WFLA. If you missed any of that portion of the show, you can catch the podcast anywhere podcasts are available. Just download the iHeartRadio app and search Beyond Reason Radio, and it will be right there later on after the show. Of course, we're also on Facebook Live. You can like the Beyond Reason Radio Facebook page, or you can follow me on Twitter at Beyond Reason R. And in the first hour, I got so into breaking news and stuff that I never really got to introduce the producer that I always introduce.
Oh, please. They know. They know.
Yeah, they know. Why would I even bother? They know you more than me at this point. Tom Benson is producing once again tonight. How are you, Tom?
Good, and we're here until 9:20?
Yep.
A strange time.
I know. It's that Gators basketball. Yeah, so we're here until 9:20, so we're going right up to Gators basketball. The pregame for Gators basketball starts at 9:20. Tip-off is around 10 p.m.
So that means I'll be in my PJs and ready for bed by 10 o'clock by the time I get home. Isn't that great?
That's what is important to you right now, okay? So, but how are you, sir?
I'm fine.
All right.
And you?
Good.
Excellent.
Just doing a radio show. By the way, the Gators are playing St. Bonaventure tonight.
The Bonnies.
At 9:20. St. Bonaventure Bonnies. That really is their name.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So they're the 11th seed. Gators are the 6th seed. This is the first round of the NCAA tournament. So should be pretty interesting on that. So one thing that was getting a lot of news, and we talked about it earlier this week, was Trump's firing of Rex Tillerson. How it kind of came out of nowhere and was done via tweet. And he said, you're fired. You're fired. He basically said it over a tweet. And the State Department came out and said, we didn't even know about this. And, of course, the undersecretary, the guy who said that, he was fired too.
Mm-hmm.
He was like, well, you can't say that. You're gone. But it's being reported now that this is just the beginning.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That
President Trump might be preparing for a firing spree is what they're calling it. Some are calling it the Trump bloodbath. That he has a whole list of people that are pretty much on the chopping block that he's about ready to axe. He's about ready to get rid of. I have some of the names that were going through that list. But Trump was actually asked about this earlier today. I have some audio of this, Tom Benson, if you're ready for that. Trump was asked about this earlier today about the reports that he's going to go on this so-called firing spree. And this is what he said.
We made a wonderful change. I think Mike Pompeo is going to be an incredible Secretary of State. We have some wonderful ideas. I've gotten to know a lot of people over the last year. I've been in Washington for a little bit more than a year, where some people have been here for 30, 40 years. I've gotten to know great people. So there'll always be change, but very little. It was a very false story. It was a very exaggerated and false story.
So Trump is saying fake news, like he always does, fake news. The problem is he said that about Rex Tillerson not that long ago.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just a couple months ago when there were reports that him and Rex Tillerson were kind of on the outs. He said, no, Rex Tillerson and I are great. He had a tweet about it and everything. It's fake news. I'm not getting rid of him. And then, of course, he does.
Again, that proves the axiom, don't pay attention to what he says. Pay attention to what he does.
Yeah, exactly right. So, but, I have kind of a theory on all of this.
Mm-hmm.
When you looked at the Super Bowl, the last year's Super Bowl, you had the Eagles and you had the Patriots.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
When you look at the two teams, they were two very different football teams. The Patriots are very buttoned up. They have everything very organized to the smallest detail. They don't give everything out to the press either. They don't. Bill Belichick is famous for just being quick and to the point when he talks to the press. Doesn't say a whole lot. And the Patriots are very buttoned up. They have everything ready and in place. And that has worked for them. They're very organized, very serious all the time. And that, for the most part, has worked for them. They became a dynasty in the NFL for years and years and years because they were that way. But this last year, you had another team that came to the Super Bowl to play them, the Philadelphia Eagles. The Philadelphia Eagles were very different. The Philadelphia Eagles were spontaneous. They were willing to take chances. You would talk to certain players on the team, and they say, we're just all about having fun. We are having as much fun as possible. They were unpredictable. There were some plays in the Super Bowl that a buttoned-up team doesn't make. We're going to take chances. We're going to play to win. We're going to do what it takes to beat the team.
And they were hungrier.
And the fact is, this year, it worked. This year, the Philadelphia Eagles, because they were like that, they were able to beat that team that was very buttoned up like the Patriots. The question is, though, how long will that last for them? In 1 year, you can have that team that's very spontaneous, very all over the place, a little unorganized. They're just all having fun.
Mm-hmm.
They're all over the place. We're going to try anything. We're going to throw anything at it. It works for a year. But when you look at the long term, are they really in a position to become a dynasty like the Patriots were? Because the Patriots were a dynasty because they were organized. They knew what they were doing. They knew what the plan was. They were serious. They worked hard, and they got to where they were.
In other words,
most of the time, well, I was just going to say most of the time, teams like the Eagles, it works for about a year, and then it gets chaotic.
In other words, can lightning strike twice?
Yeah. It gets chaotic. Things start to fall apart because you have to take things seriously.
I think they've also already made some changing in coaches. Not the head coach, but the
Yeah, well, part of that's
coaches.
because they got offered money in other places. My point in bringing up the sports analogy is because this is kind of where I am with the Trump administration. So you had the Obama administration, for instance. The Obama administration was buttoned up too much. They would hide things from the press. The press would get so frustrated because they didn't have access. Trump comes in, and he's the opposite. He campaigns and just throws everything at the wall when he's campaigning. He becomes president. He wins, surprisingly, with this new way of doing things. He was unorthodox. He was spontaneous, willing to do what it took, anything. He was hungrier. And he comes in and he wins. And now he's president, and he's doing the same thing. Right now, in some ways, it's working for him. He's been able to get a bunch of things done. My question, though, is how long can it last? I think that Trump feeds on the chaos. I think Trump likes it that the press is making these accusations about people on the chopping block.
Mm-hmm.
I think Trump loves all this attention, even if some of it is fake. I think he loves it. I think he loves that everything's fast-moving and all over the place and unpredictable, and some people are not sure if they're going to keep their jobs. Trump loves that. He wants to feed off of that. He thinks that because there's so many moving parts, that's action. Things are happening. And frankly, I think Trump, originally it was thought that Steve Bannon was the one leaking everything to the press. Mm-hmm. Steve Bannon's gone. So why is all this stuff still being leaked to the press? Two reasons. One, because his administration is so unorganized and people are unsure about their jobs and it's so chaotic that people in his administration, they're just leaking about each other all over the place because they don't know what's going to happen to them next. But there's a part of me, honestly, that thinks Trump might be leaking a lot of this stuff. That Trump, it might have been Trump himself. Well, maybe not even Trump himself, but Trump telling one of his people, hey, tell the press I'm about to go on this firing spree. I mean, that's what Trump does with everything else. He thinks of something, like the Space Force, for instance. He did a speech and he mentions a Space Force. And he knows that's going to get all this kind of crazy attention. And I think he's kind of like, oh, I'm going to say this, and this is really going to get him going. He trolls them. I think that's his approach.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is, how long is it going to work? Because how many people are going to want to work for him after a while? How many things? I mean, people are going to get tired of this. Is this really the way we need to go forever? Is this going to work for 4 or 8 years?
I've been tired for a couple months now already. And question in point, how many people pay attention to his tweets anymore? You expect them. You know they're there.
Yeah.
But I certainly don't go out of my way to read them.
So I'm not sure I have the answer to this. I don't think Trump's going to change necessarily. I thought when he was elected he would, but now I'm just convinced he's not going to. But I think a lot of this chaos that's kind of happening, Trump's criticized for it. He says he doesn't know what he's doing and all this stuff. I think Trump likes it. I think he likes the attention. I'm just not sure how good that is. I'm not sure how good that is for the future. We'll see. It's worked for him so far, just like it worked for the Eagles for 1 year. But we'll see what happens in the 2018 midterms. There's some signs that Republicans are in a lot of trouble, mostly because of Trump. And we'll see what happens in 4 years.
The Republicans are still raising a lot more cash than the Democrats are for campaigns.
Well, that's good. That's good. We'll see. We'll see what happens. It's a little bit up in the air. By the way, people on the chopping block in Trump's administration are National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster, Attorney General Jeff Sessions, VA Secretary David Shulkin.
Yep.
And by the way, he wants to get that guy from Fox News, who's on Fox and Friends sometimes, to maybe be the new VA secretary.
Oh, I've heard the name Rick Perry.
Oh, yeah, Rick Perry was another one. But there was another story that the guy from Fox News, who was thought about before, might be. So Trump's just picking people off of TV now.
Sure. Well,
Larry Kudlow.
Look at Larry Kudlow.
Yeah, exactly.
You know?
He just like, oh, you're on TV. You're good. You're going to be in my administration.
My kind of guy.
So there we go. The Rick Perry thing always fascinates me, that they get along so well, because they hated each other in the campaign season. So another person is former FBI Director Andrew McCabe. He's on the chopping block. White House Chief of Staff John Kelly.
Yep.
A lot of people are saying that Trump is tired of being controlled, I guess. That people like John Kelly are kind of reining him in a little bit, and he's getting sick of it, and he wants to go out and just do what he wants to do.
Well, he also controls the access to Trump, and Trump probably wants to be able to talk to whoever he wants, whenever he wants.
Yeah, exactly right. It's the chaos. I'm telling you, all of this chaos going around, all of these constant leaks and all of these news stories out there about Trump and everything he's going to do next behind the scenes, I'm starting to be convinced that a lot of it is him wanting it to be leaked so he gets the attention, it becomes news, and there's more of this quote-unquote action out there coming from the administration. And I think Trump leaks it, and then later on he likes to call it fake news. He might be leaking it, getting the press to say all this stuff and saying, gotcha, that's all fake. I just leaked that so you'd report it. So, very interesting. It's just a question of how long it will work. All right, that's the end of the show. We got Gators basketball coming up next. We're going to play St. Bonaventure Bonnies. Tip-off's at 10 p.m., but pregame starts in just a minute. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. And, well, I'll catch you guys next time.
To a conscience knowing so well